The village of Asokwa rested quietly at the edge of the sacred forest, a place where nature thrived untamed and legends whispered through the rustling leaves. The forest was both protector and enigma, its towering trees casting long shadows over the lives of the villagers. By tradition, the forest was revered. Its boundaries were sacred, an unspoken law etched into every child's heart. Never enter without purpose or permission. For generations, the elders had guarded this rule with unwavering resolve, and today was no different. Chief Odam, his presence commanding but weary, stood before the gathered villagers under the ancient baobab tree. His voice boomed like distant thunder, silencing the murmurs of the crowd. "Let no one forget," he declared, gripping his staff tightly. "The forest has its ways and its spirit watches. We thrive because we respect its boundaries. To break this law is to invite ruin upon us all." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd, but not all hearts were convinced. Komi, standing toward the back of the gathering, crossed his arms defiantly. At 16, he was at the peak of youthful rebellion. His dark eyes glimmered with curiosity and skepticism. He leaned toward his younger sister, Isi, who was clinging to his side with wide, cautious eyes. "Why does everyone listen to the same old stories?" Komi whispered. "A spirit in the forest? It's just an excuse to keep us afraid." Essie's voice trembled, her innocence clear in her reply. "Komi, the elders wouldn't lie. The forest is alive. Elder Afia says Nyansa guards it." At that moment, Elder Afia, the village's oldest and most revered storyteller, stepped forward. Her frail frame carried a presence that silenced even the boldest hearts. The children eagerly gathered closer, their eyes shining with awe. "I will tell you once more the tale of Nyansa," she began, her voice soft yet commanding, "so that you may understand the forest's will." The villagers listened intently as Afia's words painted a vivid picture. "Long ago," she said, her hands weaving shapes in the air, "the forest was troubled by hunters who took more than they needed. They angered the spirit, and Nyansa revealed itself, a guardian of balance, born of the trees and earth. It rewards those who respect its sanctity but punishes greed and arrogance." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "There was once a hunter who ignored this wisdom," she continued, her voice tinged with sorrow. "He thought himself above the forest's laws. Nyansa caught him in his greed and made him a warning. His cries were heard for days, but no one dared enter to save him. When the cries stopped, only his shadow remained, etched into the earth at the edge of the forest." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Even the boldest adults shifted uneasily, but not Komi. To him, the story was more challenge than warning. "That hunter was a coward," Komi muttered, just loud enough for Essie to hear. "If it were me, I'd face Nyansa and prove these stories wrong." Essie's brow furrowed with worry. "Don't say that, Komi. The forest hears everything." Later that evening, as the village settled into its nightly rhythms, a spark of rebellion ignited among the younger villagers. At the center of it stood Kojo, a brash youth with a reputation for trouble. "You all believe in these fairy tales?" Kojo scoffed, his voice carrying through the quiet night. "A forest spirit? Ha! Just stories to keep us in line. I've walked the edge of the forest, and I've never seen anything but trees." Komi, standing nearby, smirked. "Maybe the spirit is afraid of you, Kojo." "Maybe it's afraid of all of us," Kojo shot back, grinning. "But I'll prove it. Tomorrow, I'll go into the forest and come back with proof. Who's with me?" A hush fell over the group. The idea was both thrilling and terrifying. Finally, Komi stepped forward. "I'll go," he said, his voice steady. "Someone has to show them these stories are just stories." "No, Komi," Essie's small voice piped up, trembling. She had been hiding in the shadows, listening to, every word. "You can't! The spirit! What if it's real?" Komi crouched down to her level, his face softening. "Essie, it's just a forest. Don't worry about me." "Then I'm coming too," she blurted, tears pooling in her eyes. "If you go, I go." Komi hesitated but saw the determination in her eyes. He sighed. "Fine. but stay close to me." The group dispersed quietly, each conspirator retreating to prepare for their secret plan. The sacred forest loomed in the distance, its shadows deepening under the rising moon. Unbeknownst to them, the forest spirit Nyansa stirred, sensing the disturbance in the balance. The tale of defiance had begun. The moon hung low in the night sky, its light casting a pale glow over the village of Asokwa. 3 figures crept silently, past the edge of the village, their forms swallowed by the shadows of the sacred forest. Komi led the way, his steps firm despite the... Komi glanced over his shoulder, his tone dismissive. "They're just that. Stories. The forest isn't alive. It's just trees and shadows." Behind them, Kojo chuckled, though his voice betrayed a hint of unease. "Essie, you're letting the elders scare you. Soon, we'll prove there's nothing here to fear." As they ventured deeper, the forest began to close in around them. The air grew heavier, thick with the scent of damp earth and ancient wood. Leaves rustled overhead, though no wind stirred them. A faint cry echoed in the distance, an animal, perhaps, or something else entirely. Essie clutched Komi's arm. "Did you hear that?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "It's nothing," Komi said firmly, though his eyes darted toward the sound. "Keep moving." The forest seemed to shift as they walked. Pathways that once seemed clear now twisted and turned, leading them in circles. Kojo stumbled, muttering a curse under his breath. "The trees," he said, looking around. "They're moving." "That's impossible," Komi replied, though his voice wavered. Essie stopped, her wide eyes scanning the darkness. "The forest is watching us," she murmured. And then they saw them, 2 faintly glowing orbs peering out from the shadows. Kojo froze, his voice shaking as he asked, What is that?" Komi stepped forward, his jaw set. "Probably just an animal. Don't lose your nerve now." But the orbs didn't blink or move. Instead, they seemed to grow brighter, their light illuminating the twisted branches around them. Kojo's bravado cracked. "This was your idea. Komi, if we don't make it out, it's on you." "Quiet, Kojo," Komi snapped. "We need to stay calm." Essie tugged at his sleeve. "Komi, please, let's go back. The forest doesn't want us here. Can't you feel it?" Komi hesitated, but his pride wouldn't let him relent. "We've come this far. There's no turning back now." The tension between them mounted as they stumbled upon a clearing. At its center stood a crumbling shrine, its stones overgrown with moss and vines. The air around it was deathly still, as though even the forest held its breath. Essie pulled back. "We shouldn't be here. This place, it feels wrong." Kojo, however, stepped forward, his eyes fixed on a golden artifact resting on the shrine. "Look at this," he said, his voice trembling with greed. "Proof. Real proof." "Don't touch it," Essie cried, her voice breaking. "It's not ours." But Kojo's hand was already reaching out. As his fingers closed around the artifact, the forest erupted into chaos. The ground trembled, the trees groaned as though alive, and a deafening howl tore through the air. "Kojo!" Essie screamed, reaching for him, but it was too late. A gust of wind stronger than any storm swept through the clearing, and Kojo was gone, vanished into the darkness. Essie fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. "We have to leave, Komi. We've angered the spirit. Please." Komi's face was pale, his confidence shaken, but his resolve remained. "No, if the spirit is real, then we need answers. We can't go back empty-handed." Essie sobbed, her voice pleading. "Komi, listen to me. This isn't bravery. It's madness. Kojo is gone and the forest is closing in. We have to leave before it takes us too." Komi looked at her, his heart torn between fear and stubborn pride. "If we leave now, we'll never know the truth." "I can't live with that, Essie. You can go back if you want, but I have to see this through." Essie wiped her tears and rose to her feet. "I'm not leaving you," she said, her voice trembling, but firm. "But this path leads to destruction, Komi. I can feel it." They turned to find the path they had come from was gone, swallowed by the forest. The only way forward was deeper into the unknown. Komi took a deep breath, his grip tightening on Isi's hand. "We'll face whatever comes together," he said. And with that, they stepped into the shadows, leaving behind the shrine and whatever fate awaited them in the heart of the forest. The air grew heavy, thick with an ancient energy that made the hairs on Komi's neck stand on end. Suddenly, the ground beneath their feet trembled, and the forest fell into a deep, unnatural silence. Essie's breath caught in her throat, and she clutched Komi's arm. Then, from the heart of the forest, a towering figure began to rise. Its form shimmered, like smoke, its shape ever shifting, like something born of the earth itself. Nyansa, the spirit of the forest, emerged, its body wrapped in vines and glowing leaves, its hair wild and bright as the sun, radiating an ethereal light. The spirit's fiery eyes fixed on them, piercing and unblinking. The trees around them groaned in response, as though acknowledging the presence of something older than time itself. "You, who dare to trespass in my domain!" boomed Nyansa's voice, loud enough to shake the very air. It was not a sound, but a rumble that echoed through the earth as if the spirit spoke with the voice of the wind, the river, and... Komi's throat tightened. His voice barely a whisper, he tried to speak. We didn't mean to. We didn't know." Nyansa's fiery eyes softened, and the air grew cold. "Ignorance is no excuse," the spirit rumbled, its gaze shifting toward Essie. "And you, child, your heart is filled with doubt, with fear. You know better than to disobey the laws of the forest." Essie dropped to her knees, tears streaming down her face. "Please, Nyansa, forgive us. We were foolish. We didn't know how to listen. We thought we could take from the forest without understanding its power." Nyansa's gaze softened for a moment, and then the spirit raised its hand. "I shall not judge without giving you the chance to show your true selves. But know this, there will be a price for your transgressions. It is not enough to simply ask for forgiveness. You must prove you understand the balance that has been broken." Essie looked up, hope flickering in her eyes. "What must we do?" The spirit's voice grew even more powerful. "You must prove your worth. You must face the trial I set before you. Only then will the forest decide your fate." Komi's heart pounded in his chest. "What is the trial?" Nyansa's eyes glowed brighter, and the ground beneath their feet shifted once more. The forest seemed to stretch and twist, the trees warping as though they had minds of their own. "You will enter the labyrinth," Nyansa said, its voice now deep and resonant. "There, you will confront your past, your fears, and the darkness within you. Only those who emerge with humility and understanding may leave." The forest seemed to swallow the words, and the labyrinth began to form before them, twisting paths, shadows shifting and changing with every step. Isi reached out to Komi. "I don't want to do this. I'm afraid." Komi took her hand, his face a mask of determination. "We have no choice. We must face this together." And so, they stepped into the labyrinth, the twisting paths pulling them deeper into the unknown. At first, the journey seemed easy, just a maze of trees and shadows. But soon, the paths began to shift in unnatural ways. Komi's feet stumbled as the ground beneath him began to move, and he realized that the forest was alive, guiding him, testing him. Then, the illusions began. Komi found himself standing alone, in a vast open field. He saw himself as a child, greedy and arrogant, claiming everything for himself without care for others. He remembered the times he had hurt those who loved him, thinking only of himself. "Why did I do that?" he whispered, his voice breaking. The vision shifted, and Komi saw the people of his village, their faces filled with disappointment. He remembered how he had disregarded their teachings, thinking himself above the wisdom passed down through generations. Isi's voice called to him from somewhere in the distance. "Komi, come back! The path is here!" But Komi was frozen, trapped in his past. The shadows whispered to him, his deepest fears manifesting before him. "You're weak. You'll never be more than you are." The voice was his own, and it terrified him. "No," he said, his voice steady now. "I am not that person anymore. I won't be." The path ahead cleared, and Komi stepped forward, the shadows dissipating as he walked. But the test was far from over. As he continued, a new vision appeared, this one more terrifying than any before. It was of his greatest fear, the future, dark and uncertain. He saw the village burning, the people running in fear. "What have I done?" Komi whispered, his breath shallow. "What if I fail again?" But then he remembered the lessons of his ancestors, the importance of humility, of respect for the earth and the spirits that guarded it. With newfound resolve, he stepped forward, leaving the illusions behind. When he emerged from the labyrinth, Essie was there, waiting. "I did it," Komi said, his voice full of awe and humility. The forest seemed to breathe with him, its whispers fading into the night. Nyansa appeared before them once more, its fiery eyes glowing with an ancient wisdom. "You have proven yourselves," the spirit said, its voice like the wind through the trees. "You have faced your fears and your past. You have learned what it means to respect the balance of nature and humanity." Komi dropped to his knees, his head bowed. "I am sorry, Nyansa. I was blind, but I understand now. I promise to protect this forest and the wisdom it holds." Nyansa's fiery eyes softened, and the spirit spoke with pride. "The forest is forgiving, but remember, the balance must always be maintained. The lessons you have learned will guide you." Komi and Essie looked at each other, their hearts lightened. The spirit's blessing had been earned, and they were free to return to the village, but they would never forget the trials they had faced, nor the lessons they had learned. The forest would always be a part of them, and they, in turn, would protect it for generations to come. Nyansa's fiery eyes dimmed, and the great spirit's voice softened, resonating like the wind rustling through the leaves. It spoke with the weight of ages, a tone heavy with both compassion and authority. "Listen, children of the earth," Nyansa said, its presence filling the very air around them. "I spare you, for your hearts show the potential to change. But know this, you have walked a dangerous path, one that many before you have stumbled upon, never to return." Komi and Essie stood, humbled before the spirit. Their hearts pounded in their chests, a mixture of relief and fear. "Remember the tale of Kojo, the one who thought himself above the sacred rules," Nyansa continued, its voice growing somber. "He too believed he could take from the earth without giving back. Now his name is lost to time, a lesson for those who dare to forget the balance of nature. He is nothing but dust, scattered to the winds." The air grew still, the weight of the spirit's words pressing down on them. "Go now, and never forget what you have learned here today," Nyansa commanded. "Return to your village and share your tale. Let them hear your story, for the sanctity of the forest must always be respected." With a sweeping motion, Nyansa extended its hand, and the illusions that had gripped the labyrinth began to fade. The twisting paths dissolved, the shadows retreating into the ground, leaving only the peaceful rustling of leaves behind. Komi and Essie exchanged a look, their fear melting away, replaced by a quiet understanding. They knew they had been given a second chance, a gift that came with a responsibility they would not take lightly. As they stepped out of the forest at dawn, the first light of the morning touched their faces, revealing the changes within them. Their once youthful faces were now etched with the marks of experience and wisdom. They were not the same people who had entered the forest just days ago. The village awaited them, a sea of faces filled with concern, anxiety, and anticipation. As Komi and Essie emerged from the shadows of the trees, the villagers' collective breath caught. "What has happened? Where have you been?" Elder Afia called out, her voice a commanding whisper. Her keen eyes studied their faces, sensing the weight of an untold story. Komi stepped forward, his voice steady but full of emotion. "Elder, we have seen the spirit of the forest. We have been tested by Nyansa. It is a tale that will not be forgotten. Elder Afia's gaze softened, a knowing look in her eyes. Tell us everything, child. The village needs to hear your words. Komi took a deep breath and began. We entered the forest, thinking we knew what we sought. But the spirit revealed the truth of our actions, showing us the selfishness in our hearts. Nyansa called us to account, and we were made to face our past, our pride, our greed. We saw what we had done to the land, to the village, and to each other. His voice trembled, but he spoke with sincerity. I saw Kojo, and the mistake he made. He thought he was above the forest's rules, and now he is gone, a forgotten soul. I too thought I could take without giving back, but I was wrong. A hush fell over the gathered villagers. The spirit told us to remember Kojo's fate, Komi continued, and warned that no one is exempt from the balance. We must respect the forest, its wisdom, and its power. The villagers listened, intently, some nodding, others with faces marked by concern. I urge you all, Komi said, his voice rising with strength, do not repeat our mistake. Do not allow the arrogance of youth to blind you to the traditions that bind us to the earth. Elder Afia stepped forward, her voice grave. Your words are true, Komi. The forest has spoken, and we must listen. We will honor the spirit and the lessons you have shared. The forest must never be disrespected again. The villagers gathered around, humbled by the tale they had just heard. In the days that followed, the village came together. They rebuilt the crumbling shrine to Nyansa, offering gifts of fruits, herbs, and carved statues as a sign of atonement and gratitude. The air was thick with the scent of incense, and the sound of prayers rose to the heavens. Elder Afia stood before the village, her voice strong as she began to share the tale of Komi and Isi's journey. This is a story to pass down, a lesson for all generations to come, she said. The forest is not just a place of trees, but a living, breathing spirit that must be respected. This tale will become part of our history, as a reminder of the balance that we must always uphold. Komi, now changed and wiser, stood beside her. His youthful curiosity had been replaced by a deep respect for tradition and the lessons of the past. I will protect the forest, Komi said, his voice firm. I will ensure that the village remembers and that the spirit of Nyansa is honored for generations to come. And so, the village thrived, renewed in its respect for